Yo, what up guys? So today we are talking about intensity of effort, no fluff sets. Now bear with me, I just got this tablet here, so I'm getting used to writing on it, so it might be a little bit slower, but we have a lot to cover today, so you are in for a ride. So intensity is critical for muscle growth, okay? Now, intensity is the momentary effort that you apply during a repetition relative to an individual's current ability to produce force. So we call this relative intensity. It's moment to moment, okay? Now, we have two different hypertrophy pyramid strategies, actually. We have the natty hypertrophy pyramid and the druggy hypertrophy pyramid. So over here in the natty realm, these guys, we are happy. You know why? Because we have a lot of hair, you guys. We have a lot of hair, and we got this big old nuts, okay? Gigantic balls. Now these guys over here, the druggies, those guys that rely on testosterone, steroids, they're not very happy. Sad face. Because they have like 3 hairs, guys, and they got these like little nads, right? You can barely even see them. That thing is probably not even that long, to be honest with you. But they're just not happy because, you know, they're drug addicts and they got small nuts and they barely have any hair, right? So these hypertrophy strategies here, this is basically an application. Although in my last paper, I presented this pyramid as an overarching hypertrophy strategy. Now it works for both, you know, naturals and enhanced, and you could argue that it's the best route for hypertrophy, okay? But most of the enhanced don't follow this, and if you're natty, you're better off following this, right? Most of the druggies, they follow this strategy where the whole goal, too, guys, is always mechanical tension, internal mechanical tension. It's what we want. They just go about it a different way. Their hierarchy is different. But I bring this up and I show you because I have another video on this. You can look and see I have the distinction between the two. But the reason I bring this up in this video is because the druggies don't need to train hard in order to see results, right? That hierarchy of importance is a little bit higher on the pyramid. We naturals need to train hard, okay? Now, let's be real. Most people don't train hard. They stop sets short because it's more effort than they're willing to put out. Or if they feel a burn, you know, it hurts, and they stop, you know. So basically what they're doing is, they're basically doing fluff sets. Most people, this is what most people do, even the steroid junkies. But the steroid junkies can grow like this, but when you're natty, you can't. You have to train with intensity. You have to train hard, okay? So there is a massive distinction between the natural and the druggy when it comes to intensity. Like I said, most people don't even train hard in general, but the people that suffer from that are naturals, okay? The drug addicts, they don't have to train hard. Their training can be easy, okay? And not all of them train in an easy fashion. Some of them train hard, for sure. But the majority of people in general don't train hard, and the druggy bodybuilders are just kind of thrown into that mix, okay? Now, before we get into this, we have to understand the difference between stimulus and fatigue, okay? So training produces two outcomes at the same time. So one is the signal to grow, and the second one is the cost the body must recover from, okay? Now, those are the two outcomes. Now, the stimulus is created by high mechanical tension, okay? So this is high effort contractions. They recruit muscle fibers responsible for growth, okay? Now, fatigue is everything that reduces performance, okay? So metabolic stress, nervous system strain, energy depletion, and, systemic stress, right? So fatigue does not equal stimulus, right? This is very important to understand before we get into all of this. Fatigue does not equal stimulus, okay? I don't know if that's the symbol for doesn't equal, but. So basically a workout can feel exhausting, right? Without producing an optimal growth signal. So you have stimulus, adaptation is what we want, right? And fatigue, you're gonna have a recovery requirement. So there's gonna be some fatigue when you're trying to apply the stimulus. And we want more fatigue, we want more stimulus and less fatigue. We want to reduce fatigue, right? So maximum stimulus, minimizing fatigue. So this is critical for everyone, but more critical for naturals, okay? So better programs improve the stimulus to fatigue ratio. It's not just about effort or exhaustion, okay? It's not just going in and just, killing yourself to see how far past failure you can do on every set, or how many sets that you can withstand and do, okay? So, and guys, if you want help with any of this, I run a natural aesthetics program. Top link in the description. Check it out, click it, watch the videos that I have there. Now, training intensity, it's assessed by your repetition effort. Okay, so remember the definition. Momentary applied during a repetition. So that is all momentary. It's gauged on a rep-to-rep basis within a set, all right? So I want to show you an example of this, of what this looks like, right? So it's in the moment. It is relative to your current ability to produce force, all right? So I'm going to show you a quick example of me going to muscular failure. It's not that I advocate it on every single set, right? In fact, I don't think naturals should go to failure on every single set, but This is an example of what training intensity is. It's an example of repetition effort and going to failure, all right? So I'm kind of further into the set here. Every rep is harder. Of course, I'm controlling the negatives. And I go to failure here. This was complete failure. This set was complete failure for sure. I barely got that one. I think I got one more. Maybe it's two more. This might be it. Yep. I couldn't do it. That is what effort is. Okay, that is an example of training intensity where it's high intensity, but it's based on a rep to rep basis. All right. Now, what is HIIT? Okay, and this is all very important because we're talking about intensity. This is high intensity training. All right, now some people think high intensity application is only when you reach momentary muscular failure, right? But that's not entirely true, shall we say. High intensity training, it doesn't only mean muscular failure. So people think it's just muscular failure. This is what defines high intensity training, okay? But that's not true. A repetition becomes high intensity when effort reaches roughly 80 to 100% output. All right. Now, this can be a rep to failure, like what I just showed you. This could be a ballistic rep, like what you see CrossFitters doing. You're telling me they're not working hard? You're telling me they're not pushing limits? Like ballistic reps, 100% force, like a sprint or a baseball pitch. Those guys, it's fast, but that constitutes a high intensity rep. Now, this could also be a controlled rep, okay? Now, of course, every repetition that you do, it becomes harder, which increases the effort output. So yes, your output gets closer to 100% as you approach failure. And this is what we want. But high intensity reps are between 80 to 100% effort while approaching limit failure. Okay? Just so we're clear on what high intensity training actually is. All right? So that being said, rep by rep force intent is very important for muscle growth. So intensity is assessed at the repetition level, right? Since the percentage of applied muscular effort on any given load is momentary. Now, this is a qualitative measurement. It can't be measured scientifically. It's not like absolute load, right? So one of the goals in training is to make sure that the sets are intense enough to stimulate muscle. All right, so how do we do this? Because again, pay attention, naturals, this is really important for us. If you're a drug addict, I don't even know why you're watching this bullshit. Get off my channel, right? Like, this ain't for you, dog. You know, this is for natties. So there's really three. Whoa. It's not how you spell that. There's three intensity models that you can apply, okay? So one, I keep tapping this thing on the side here. Low intensity to failure. That's one model. Now, I like to call this the fatigue model, which I'll explain here in a second. Then we have high, holy moly. There's definitely some getting used to this pen here. High intensity to failure. And then we have not to failure, right? So we have low intensity to failure, it's a fatigue model. We have high intensity to failure, that's a stimulus model. Then we have high intensity not to failure, and that's also a stimulus model, okay? Now, let's go through the first one, low intensity to failure. Now, like I said, I like to call this the fatigue model because that's kind of what it does. So we have efforts, right? We have 100%, we have 0%, and over here we have reps. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, the fatigue model looks something like this. And this is failure, okay? So, this is very typical in typical in modern HIIT programs, especially with super slow. Okay. Now, in order to do this, so again, effort per repetition is lower from rep 1 and it ramps up until failure. You need a massive reduction in weight because you are intentionally moving weight slowly, all right? Now, and that's how they do it in super slow, and there's a lot of HIIT guys today that are doing not quite super slow speeds because they'll typically like do 10-10, 10-10 tempo, and some guys, you'll see like 4-4, stuff like that in that realm. But you still have to reduce the load to intentionally move slower. So it's volitionally restricted speeds is what it is. So since the load is less, relative to your true capability, right? There, the load is less relative to your true capability. There's going to be a reduction in mechanical tension. And remember, going back to the hypertrophy hierarchy, the pyramid, this is what we all want. We want internal mechanical tension because that is the driver of muscle growth. So how do we induce internal mechanical tension? So whenever you have a reduction in load, you will have less mechanical tension per repetition until failure, right? Because you're not truly handling loads you can handle because you are purposely going slower, so you have to reduce the weight, right? So it's not a true progression, right? It's not true progressive load because the weight must be reduced. You can handle more. If you're intentionally slowing the reps down, not at the end when you're trying to move as fast as possible, but you can't because you've approached failure. If you are intentionally slowing the repetitions down, you have to reduce the weight that you can use. You can use more. You have to reduce the weight, but you can handle more because you are purposely slowing the reps down, right? So it's actually not true. It's not a true progressive load performance marker. And in turn, because you can handle more, and in turn, you reduce the mechanical tension that the muscle fibers receive per repetition because it is less load. Now, if you reach failure, let me erase this. If you reach failure with this model, it can work. It has worked. Definitely. You know, it's just not efficient because the muscle isn't fully challenged until you're already exhausted, right? And this is why I call it the fatigue model. Now, this is usually the safest model if we're talking about safety, but I've seen otherwise because of PR chasing. Right? I've seen hit people trying to get the PR so bad that form just kind of gets screwed up, and we're after the PR, and the same thing in CrossFit, right? So that is one similarity that you see in HIIT and CrossFit. A couple similarities, right? They're both intense. They just go about it a different way. But we have to hit that PR, so we sacrifice form to do it. Not everyone in HIIT does that. Not everyone in CrossFit does that, but I've seen that. I've seen it in CrossFit, obviously. I've seen it in HIIT. I've seen, like, literally 20 feet away training. I'm training, you know, and I've seen other trainers that do the same thing. Like, they perform HIIT on their clients, and I've seen that happen. Now, I think there's some, yeah, hello. I think there's some utility in this, right? I don't think it's all bad. So I think if you're a beginner, that's good. I think a novelty stimulus, and that's kind of more of a beginner, like you've been training for maybe 6 months and you do something brand new and you're not sure how to do it. Move slower, reduce the load, right? Sure. Injuries, post-surgery, I think this is a good application, definitely. And then learning failure. If you don't know how to train to failure, I think this is a good way to learn how to train to failure on machines. So the low intensity to failure model, the fatigue model, I think is appropriate in certain cases. But if you're outside of all of this, then I don't think it's going to be the best model for muscle growth. Okay. So then we have the high intensity to failure model. These are high intensity contractions per repetition. So again, we have effort. We have 100%. We got 0%. We got reps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we'll mark 80% effort right here. So what you'll see is right, so this is basically 80%. And then you have 80% to 100%. And then this is failure. So any reps in this realm constitutes high intensity training, true high intensity training. Now this model right here is classic HIIT. So Arthur Jones HIIT, okay? This is classic Arthur Jones high intensity training. So in the Nautilus bulletins, in the first one, he advocated moving as fast as possible, but on every rep, but consistent with proper form and safety considerations. Okay, that's actually right from the bulletins, right? Quote. Now, in the Nautilus bulletins, like number 2, he actually wanted more control in the initial repetitions, and then as you got deeper into the set, you got faster. As it got harder, you tried to accelerate faster. But as it got harder, your speed is still slower, even though you're trying to do the reps as fast as possible, right? It's intent. It's repetition intent. Remember, that's that intensity. But this model right here is more of a classic HIIT Arthur Jones model. Not this one. This one is more super slow, Ken Hutchins, because Ken Hutchins started working for Arthur Jones, and he was doing rehabilitation with osteoporosis subjects, and he created this slower protocol, which in that instance, you know, with those people, for sure, I totally get it. But Arthur Jones, he never, actually in the Nautilus bulletins, he never prescribed any kind of a tempo, right? There, you won't find any, 2-4, 3-4, 4-4. You won't find any kind of a positive concentric or eccentric tempo in the Nautilus bulletins, okay? So tempo recommendations within HIIT came after AJ, again with Ken Hutchins, and then of course Mike Mentzer. But even Mike Mentzer didn't apply those tempo restrictions early on. Later on in his years when he was training people, he did. But from all of the video footage that we have, training HIIT, training with intensity, it was like this. Okay, it was this model right here. Now, again, this is between 80 and 100% effort. Output. Okay. This is a really good model for growth. All right. But failure on every single set isn't what we want as naturals, because this maximizes fatigue. All right, so we are limited by recovery capacity. All right, some sets to failure is fine, but not every single set. All right, but this model, this intensity model right here is for growth is certainly better than the fatigue intensity model, 100%. Because over here, remember, it's reduction of mechanical tension, right? It's reduction of load, reduction of mechanical tension, because we have to reduce the speed of movement in those first few reps. And especially if you're going 10-10, that's very, very slow. Even 4-4 on a concentric is very, very slow. And not to mention it with just, traditional equipment, because sometimes they'll do this stuff on specialized equipment and they have specialized cams, which makes it better. But if you have typical equipment, Life Fitness, Matrix, Cybex, dumbbells, free weights, right? It's in a traditional set, the eccentric is a reprieve. Right? It's the easier part of the repetition, right? So on the positive, the concentric, you're overcoming gravity, and then whenever you lower the weight, you go with the force of gravity, and it's the easier part of the repetition, not the harder part of the repetition. So by nature, it's already the easier part of the rep. You've overcome the hard part, which is the positive, the concentric. Now you have to lower it, which we still want slower negatives, but if it's already easier because you've reduced the amount of weight that you're handling to compensate for the very slow speed in the concentric portion of the repetition, imagine how much easier it's going to be on the negative portion. Right? Now, if it's like this, right, and you pop that rep up and it takes you 1 to 2 seconds, and you do a slower negative, that's different, right? Like you're handling heavier loads because it's 80 to 100% effort output. So that negative isn't going to be as much of a rest as these negatives, right? So overall, these reps are almost kind of pointless, to be honest with you. But it can work. It just maximizes, you get a lot of fatigue. So there's a lot of fatigue happening here going up, right? It's not a ton of stimulus. And we want to minimize fatigue and maximize stimulus. And here we have fatigue and stimulus. And then, of course, when we reach failure, we have a lot of fatigue. And that's a big reason why we want to not go to failure on every single set, because we want stimulus. We don't want fatigue. Okay? So we just looked at two models, the low intensity to failure and the high intensity to failure, right? And now we're going to look at the high intensity to near failure. Now, the first model, like I said, it's not the best hypertrophy stimulus. It's less load, less mechanical tension, higher fatigue. The second model is better, and the hypertrophy stimulus is really good, but the issue is failure on every set, which again causes fatigue. So a better model is where you apply high intensity reps taken to proximal failure. Now this recruits nearly all motor units while avoiding the disproportionate fatigue cost of true failure, okay? So, in the low intensity model, we have fatigue first, and then stimulus is last, okay? Now failure every set, we have stimulus first, or early, you could say, but it's excessive fatigue, all right? Now, near failure, gotta get better at those arrows, huh? We have high stimulus and those arrows. Fatigue is controlled, all right? Now that's predicated on this last one right here. Your reps have to be high intensity, right? So they gotta be 80 to 100% for the near failure model to work. So I'm gonna draw that graph here. So efforts, we have 100, we have 80, we have 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so it's the same thing as the other graph. Actually, don't want to do that. So we have, let's say that's the 80% mark. This is the 100. So everything in between here is between 80 to 100% output, okay? So, but you can still do this controlled, guys. This is nothing like, we don't have to be ballistic, right? So rep 1, rep 2, we're still between 80% and 100. And then guess what? Failure would be here. And this is an example, guys. All right, don't get your panties in a twist as far as repetition ranges. But we don't do these 2 reps, all right? We stop. So we're doing these in control, right? We're not CrossFitting this shit, right? But we stop short of failure, okay? And this is what high intensity near failure looks like. Now, this is important for naturals because we are, again, limited by our recovery capacity. So near failure is good because we have sufficient motor unit recruitment. We have high mechanical tension, right? And we have repeatable performance basically from session to session. We can do this from session to session. We're not completely annihilated because we went to failure on every single set, so we have to take 5 days off to recover, when locally the tissue's fine, but systemically we're wrecked, okay? So Erase this. So the goal isn't to maximize exhaustion, guys. Okay? We need to maximize stimulus per... Come on, man. Stop fucking with me here. I'm close to the edge of this. Per units. Let's go, dude. I know you can do this. Per unit of fatigue. So we want to maximize the stimulus per unit of fatigue. All right. So again, we want stimulus. We don't want fatigue. We want to minimize fatigue. Now, why do we want high training effort? We want this for two reasons. We want to maximize motor unit recruitment. We want this because it recruits as many fibers as possible. Right, this is important. The second reason is high fiber tension. And this allows fibers to experience maximal mechanical stress. Right, and remember, that's what we're looking for. So we recruit the fibers that we need to. And then those same fibers need to be stressed with high tension. This is internal mechanical tension, okay? And we want it to be high because mechanical tension is the driver of muscle growth. That is the primary driver, guys. Right? Going back. Mechanical tension is something that we're all striving to induce internally. And then we have these stimulus variables in how we do it. Obviously, we do it with external loads, where we're trying to induce internal mechanical tension so it produces growth. Okay? So we want to maximize motor unit recruitment. So we garner all the fibers that we can in that muscle that we're trying to stimulate. And then those fibers need to experience high tension. So let's talk about maximal motor unit recruitment, okay? Now, this is the nervous system deciding on how many muscle fibers it needs to activate to create a specific level of force. Okay, so basically it's going to look something like this. This is a whole motor unit. And we have some fibers here. It's a weird looking fiber, man. It's a weird ass looking fiber, right? Now, this would be considered a motor unit, okay? And let's say this is tied to 100,000 fibers, all right? So this right here would be a motor unit. And it's in charge of all these fibers that we have here, a whole bunch of them, not just one. And motor units are recruited based on force demand, okay? Smallest to largest, all right? But it's all based off of demand. And that's what we call Henneman's size principle, okay? And basically, we have this, we have force going this way, we have low threshold motor units and high threshold. Let me redo that one. Let me just redo this one too. So we have low threshold. It does not like the edge, I'm noticing. And we have high threshold motor units, okay? And basically, the more force that you produce, it recruits more of those high threshold motor units, all right? Now, once we have all the available motor units, so that's what we want. Once we have all the available motor units firing, right, we have all the motor units and we have all the fibers inside firing, we want those fibers to experience high tension. And that is why proximal failure or muscular failure is important. That's a very critical component for high fiber tension. Okay, so let's talk about high fiber tension. As your rep speed slows, as you get closer to muscular failure, you'll have a lower contraction velocity, and this increases mechanical tension on each muscle fiber, all right? And we know this because of the basically muscle physiology, something called the force velocity curve, all right? So the force velocity curve is an inverse relationship between speed and force production, meaning the faster a rep is, the less force your muscles can produce, and the slower a rep is, the more force it can generate, all right, or it can produce. So, show you a little graph here, and then we have velocity, and it's like this, guys, right? So if forces are high, this means that velocity has to be low, right? So 0, 100. If velocity is high, this means that forces are low, 0, 100. And that's just how it works, okay? So high velocity means less cross-bridging, so less opportunity for the cross-bridging action to actually take place and produce force production. And vice versa, whenever it's slower, you have more opportunity for basically these cross bridges to attach inside of the muscle, the fibers, and produce force, right? So they attach to each other. So even if your motor units are already recruited, right? That's not enough. That's part of it, but it's not enough. The real magic happens when your reps slow down near the end, involuntarily, okay? Again, going back to the fatigue model, not voluntarily restricted speeds, involuntarily restricted speeds, all right? This is where the muscle fibers experience greater mechanical tension. Now, in my paper, I introduced a term called velocity under tension. And I talked how this is a key factor in influencing the muscle growth process. And this is the biggest reason, guys. We'll throw the cross bridging in there. Why not? This is the biggest reason why we get to failure or close to failure, is because we want very slow repetitions forced on us, not, again, doing it on our own purposely, right? Or we purposely move slower. We need to be forced to slow down. And if those reps are forced to slow down, it's like the last 4 or 5 reps, those are the growth reps. And it's because velocity slows. And when that happens, you have greater cross bridging and you have greater mechanical tension. Those fibers, those individual fibers, experience high tension, okay? So we have to recruit as many fibers as possible. But we want those fibers to experience high tension. Okay, so like a good example I like using is a baseball pitch. So whenever a professional baseball pitcher winds back and throws the baseball, he's recruiting everything. Okay, he's recruiting, in order to move those muscles, he's recruiting the low and the high threshold motor units, because it is all based on demand, right? It is all based on, it's all based on demand. Come on. So he's recruiting, that pitcher is recruiting everything possible, everything, right? Because he has to. There's a demand where the body's like, all right, we're going to use low threshold motor units and high threshold motor units. So it's recruiting everything. But the reality is, he is over here. It's high velocity, right? So there's no tension time where it's slow. There's not enough of those reps. Of course, if he kept doing it over and over, just like a set, he would slow down eventually, right? But it's just a quick pitch. But my point to that is he's recruiting all of the available motor units to perform that task because it's based off of force requirements. It's based on demand. So he is recruiting all of the motor units to perform that task in that movement. So when it comes to growth, that's step 1. Step 2, though, is once we've recruited all of those fibers, they now have to experience high tension. This is very important, guys. And this is why we get close to failure, or this is why we go to failure. This is it, okay? Because those fibers that we recruited have to experience high tension, because that's going to then induce high internal mechanical tension that drives that, mechanical transduction happens, and there's a cascade of events that occur that send the signal, it's the stimulus signal for growth. And then of course we need enough of those repetitions, which is why one set isn't meaningful enough. But you don't need to do like 20 plus sets to do it, but we have to land somewhere in the middle. But that's volume, that's a different video. But this is why we have to get close to failure, if not to failure, because we have to have those fibers experience high tension. Okay, so velocity under tension matters. So again, high effort reps, proximal to failure, is critical for growth. okay? Critical for growth. So, again, we need to recruit as many fibers as possible. But those fibers that we recruit, we want them to go through high stress. But, so high stress, right? Stimulus, but we need to minimize fatigue, okay? And if we do this, this is our best outcome. So stimulus, fatigue. This is the signal for growth, okay? And it's the best for natties. Absolute best way to do this for natties. It's high effort reps, proximal to failure. So there's a quick note on repetition speed here. Okay, because I know we're talking about intensity and then really getting after it and all that, right? Now, we don't want to IFBB Pro reps. What's going on with my damn handwriting all of a sudden? It's almost like I'm using the Apple Pen. We don't want to IFBB Pro our reps, okay? Because that's just stupid. I know you've seen those guys. They just kind of throw weight, like Ronnie Coleman. That shit is silly, guys. Okay? And CrossFit. Like, we don't want to do that, all right? And then we don't want to super slow our reps. A lot of HIIT guys out there that are going painfully slow. They're using dumbbells. Like, they're doing dumbbell side raises and they're doing like 5-5. Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you guys doing? You know? It's maximizing their fatigue. Yeah, they go to failure, but they are maximizing their fatigue, and I just don't think that's the best way to go about doing that, right? So, ballistic reps are no good, right? Ballistic reps are stupid. So we don't want to IFBB Pro your reps because that offloads the muscles and it's dangerous, right? We want the muscles to feel the contraction from point A to point B, right? But we don't want to go so fast that we offload the muscle. Plus, it's too high. The forces on the joints are no good. And then, you know, we don't want to go slow either. That's no good. Unless, of course, like I said, right, you're in these other categories like injury, post-surgery, beginner, learning to go to failure. There's utility in that. All right, there's more utility in this than there is in this. That's just stupid. I don't care what anybody says. That shit is just stupid. So you see these guys in the gym throwing their weights around. It's just, that's clown shit right there, guys. Okay. But I don't think these are good for growth either, you know? It's not optimal for growth. So again, it intentionally slows down your reps. It reduces effort per rep, especially the eccentric, the negative, right? So we don't want to do that unless, you know, you're a special case, like injury, you're a noob, anything like that. But we need reps to be hard, okay? And they need to be taken close to muscular failure, right? We don't want them ballistic. We want reps controlled. Remember, 80 to 100% output per repetition. And of course, as you get closer to failure, it's going to climb closer to 100. But you can still be in control at 80%. So rep 1 to rep 12, it's a hard set. That's a high intensity set. Those are high intensity reps. then the question becomes, do you go to failure or do you not go to failure? Right? So I don't think you need to. That's the reality of that. Right? Now some sets are fine, but every single set going to failure, I think it's really just going to burn you out. Okay? So yeah, if you guys want help on transforming your body naturally, and you want to build some muscle, lose some fat, I have a natural aesthetics program. Top link in the description. Click it, check out the videos. We do all of this naturally. I teach all this stuff and then, a lot more. And I have full programs. I show you how to do this. We train hard. We optimize our volume. That's a case-by-case basis. It's for each individual, right? But yeah, this is how we do it, guys. This is the best route when it comes to naturals, right? It's high intensity training to near failure. Again, some of these HIIT guys are like, well, that's not high intensity training. Well, that's not true, okay? Because we went through the definition of what training intensity actually is, how it's defined, it's momentary effort applied. And honestly, if anything, I'm not so sure I would even consider this model, which is a popular HIIT model, right? Especially now, a lot of these HIIT guys are doing this model. I'm not even so sure I consider this HIIT. It's a fatigue model. Yeah, they're going to failure, but if we're going off of the definition of what intensity is, right? The last couple reps are intense. Their first few reps, they're not. They're just fatiguing themselves. Fatigue and intensity are not the same thing. So is this more of a HIIT protocol than this high intensity to near failure? Because more of these reps are high intensity, right? Something to think about. But yeah, anyway, guys, if you want to do this naturally, without the drugs, without the TRT, which also is interesting, going back to HIIT. Just gonna throw this in there. I'm gonna make a video on this, but a lot of the older HIIT guys, they're using stuff, guys. Like, they are legit using TRT, and they've come out and have said this. Or steroids, both. So if you look at photos prior of them using one set to failure, did they have a physique? That's my question. Do your homework. Now they have a physique, but is it the 5-5 tempo to failure, one set only? Is that giving them the physique? Or is it something else? Right? So, just something to be aware of, something to be cautious of, because, yeah, you just gotta be careful with some of the stuff, guys. But bottom line, in my opinion, this right here is the best route for naturals. Minimize fatigue, right? So we don't do too much volume. We don't go to failure on every single set. Maximize stimulus. And we do that through recruitment and high fiber tension. So reps have to be high intensity, near failure. And that is intensity, guys. That is high intensity training. So again, if you need help with this, check out the top link in the description. It goes to my school community. I have an entire program. Watch those videos, and I'll show you how it is done.